Hey guys, welcome back to The Art of Craftsmanship. My name is Dustin, and today in the shop we are going to be doing some blacksmithing. Now, I have kind of collected a bucket full of blacksmithing, just metal scraps and stuff to be able to play around with. And so what we're going to practice with today, and I'm saying practice because I'm not a blacksmith, and don't take this as any specific lessons on how to do the correct type of blacksmithing. This is just me having fun as someone who likes to make stuff and like to make specifically knives. So I am going to, we're going to play around with making a blacksmith, a railroad spike knife today. So I've been collecting railroad spikes just off and on for the last few years with the intent to be able to play around with them and practice just moving metal. So we are going to kind of draw out a handle a little bit more from the main top, and then we'll draw out the full blade before we finish it on the grinders and all. So let's go ahead and get the forge started. So I just put the spike in, and the forge still needs to kind of warm up and get settled and kind of clean itself so it's running really well. But once that spike is hot, I'm going to work on just drawing out the handle first. So I'm going to flatten out a little bit and draw it out a little bit. So it'll be a little bit flatter, a little bit wider, and a little bit longer. Just kind of working on the handle part specifically. I'm about to pull the spike out. This is the last heat I'm going to do on working the handle, I think. I may finesse it a little bit more, but basically because I'm not twisting the handle, I wanted to kind of add a little bit more, shape to it. So I'm thinning it out a little bit, drawing it flat, and then I'm going to have it so that way it has a little bit of belly in the middle of the handle. Also, I'm going to be making sure that it's 4 inches. I want to have it at least 4 inches. The nice thing is that the face of my anvil is 4 inches wide. So I'll bring it out and I'll just test the right length on those 4 inches, make sure I'm out the 4 inches, and then I'll just make sure that, everything is the way I want it, shape-wise. want to go too much more, but I think that's pretty good, at least to start with for the handle. I'm going to go ahead and flip it around now, put it back into the forge, and then I'll start drawing out the blade. What I want to do first is I want to bring the tip of that spike down. Right now the tip of it is evenly in the middle from top to bottom. I want to bring that spike tip down to where the spine of the knife would be. So I'm going to hammer it down back toward the spine, so that way I have the shape of the knife ready to go before I start drawing it out. So you can see it didn't take much, it was just enough to be able to hammer that tip down. So now the spine, which is hitting against the anvil now, is flat. The tip is back, and I can start drawing out the blade. I'm going to put that in and get it nice and hot, and then I'll start drawing that out. I just want to make sure that I keep my 4 inches of handle to here, so I can make a little, and start drawing out from there. So you can see I was using the flat side of my hammer first to draw it out some. Then I was using the cross peen sign to actually help draw the blade out longer. So I'll go back in, hit that a little bit, draw it out some. And I want to go back in for another heat. I'll do it a little bit more, and then I'll flatten it all back out again. So you can see I'm working on what's called a distal taper. So I want it to taper from the beginning of the blade to the tip. So I'm just going to try to work on that, get it drawn out and tapered evenly to the tip so it gets thinner as it goes out. Very hot in the shop today. Whew. I'm gonna go ahead and pull this out, and I'm gonna start just straightening the blade, make sure everything is nice and even. I'll do it while it's nice and hot, and then I'll put it back in, I'll flip it around the opposite way, and I'll bring it back out, and I'll start working on straightening the handle. So I'm trying to make sure that it's nice and even and straight with the spine and and also the handle. Again, I'll straighten that a little bit more, but just want to make sure that it's exactly how I want it, or at least close to how I want it before I let it cool down and I move over to doing some grinding and all. All right, we are pretty doggone straight right down the handle and the blade. Nice and even. The very end, this like hammer end is still a little funky, and I'm gonna I might take a little material off of that once we get to the actual grinding and even it up so it looks straight, because that's a little kind of off-centered. But the handle and the blade are really straight, which is really nice. The back and the spine, the back of the handle and the spine, there's a little wobble, but I'll straighten that up in grinding as well. And then obviously the tip, I'm gonna bring the point down. I wanted to have a little bit more of a drop point blade anyway, so I'll bring the tip down a little bit, work on just the transition between the handle and into the blade. But all that'll be done in grinding. Now I'm gonna go ahead and just put it back into the forge. I'll turn the forge off and let it cool down slowly in the forge. That way it anneals and it's soft enough for us to do all the grinding on. It's been a few days and we're back in the shop now. So last time we were here, I just finished up all of the forging on the knife, and I left the blade inside the forge so that way it could cool down completely and anneal. So now it's soft and it's ready for shaping. So I'm gonna be using my 1x30, and I'll just go through and I'll just shape everything, shape the blade, do some finishing work on the handle, get all that the way I want it before I switch over to doing all my bevels, again with the 1x30. All right guys, well I have the handle mostly shaped now. So I just kind of flatten everything out, clean it up a little bit, then I just add a little bit of rounded edge to it just to feel really nice. And the thickness of this is really nice. You can see it's got a little palm swell in the middle here, which matches the palm swell in the middle here as well. So it just fits really well in the hand. I cleaned up just the bottom edge here, and then top and bottom a little bit of here just to also clean up the just the profile of the blade. I'm really happy with it right now. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to beveling the actual blade edge now. I wanna make a scribe line here, how far back I'm going to go from the tip where I'm gonna start my plunge line. And I want it to be even on both sides, so I'm just gonna use my calipers. I'll flip it over and do the same on the other side. I'm also going to go ahead and mark now the depth of my bevel. Now, this is not going to be a super crisp line because, again, I want that kind of brute to forge look, so it's going to come up, and the blade has a little bit of variation to it in thickness, so the line between the bevel and the spine will be, won't be super crisp, but I do want to give myself kind of a guideline just to know pretty much how far I want to go up, and I do want to go about 2/3 or so up. So I go ahead and set that, and then I'll just keep my finger the same way and do the same for the other side. And so then I know just a general distance on both sides to take my bevels. I just finished up doing my bevel grinding as well as all of the kind of finish grinding around the edges and on the handle. So right now the blade's ready to be heat treated, but before I do the final heat treat in the quench, I want to do normalizing cycles. And what normalizing does is basically by heating up and hammering and cooling and heating and hammering and grinding, I've kind of agitated all the grain structure of this steel to the point where it's not as fine and clean as I'd like it to be. So normalizing will, what I'll do is I'll heat this up to a critical temperature, I'll take it out of the forge and I'll let it cool down slowly. And I'll do that a couple times, and that'll help to just kind of clean up and even out all that grain structure before I go in for my final quench. I'm gonna go ahead and let that cool down all the way till it's back to just black. Then maybe for another like 5 more minutes, and then I'll get back in for the second of 3 normalizing cycles. I'm gonna warm up my oil. So you want your oil to be warm, or you want it to be somewhere between 90 and 120, 140 degrees. So basically the temperature of warm bath water. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this just, it's a 3/4 inch square stock. I'm gonna put it into the forge, get it nice and hot, and I'll use this to warm up my oil. Taking out my knife now for my final thermal cycle. So I'll go ahead and let this cool down completely. And while this is cooling, my bar of mild steel is in there. I'm gonna go ahead and pull that out. I'll warm up my oil, get it nice and ready before I go in for the final heat treatment. I'll pull it out and quench it. I'm just checking. It looks like we stayed nice and straight through the quench. which is always just a concern. Usually when you have a spine that's this thick, it's not too much concern, but you never know. So I always just pull it out and check it. There is like a small window of time in between the final hardness that as the temperature and the hardness is coming down, you can kind of straighten up your blade if you need to. But this stayed nice and straight, so I don't have to worry about that. I'm gonna go ahead and grab a file now and I'll test the edge for hardness. Looks like we're good and hard all the way. Should be good. So it looks hardened everywhere. It's just skating the file. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean this off, let it cool down the rest of the way, clean it off, and then I'll take it over to the grinder and just kind of grind off a little bit of the forge scale so we can see the shiny edge, so that we can go ahead and do our temper cycles, and we'll be able to see the temper color on that blade. I'm going to use my kitchen oven to do the tempering. So I'm going to set my oven to 400 degrees, and then I'm going to put this in there for 2 cycles of 2 hours. So put it in there for 2 hours, pull it out, let it air cool completely, and then back in for another 2 hours for another cycle, and then my tempering will be complete. All right guys, so we have finished up the temper cycles. It's been a couple days, so we're gonna go down the shop now and do the finish grinding. You guys can see the temper color on the blade. It's this kind of medium to dark straw color, and that's what I'm looking for my hardness of my blade. So I'm gonna go over to the grinder now and just move through higher and higher grits, clean this up, and put a nice sharp edge on it. I'm going to move over to the 1x30 now and finish up the actual sharpening of the edge with my paper belt. I'm going to finish off the sharpening with my leather strop, but before I do that, I just want to give you a quick tip. When you are finishing your knives or even working on your bevels, you want to try to keep the tip of your knife really nice and pointy, and a good way to do that is when you're grinding, as you're dragging your knife across and you're grinding, stop your blade before you get to the edge of the belt. So if you bring it all the way across and you go off the edge of the belt, that'll tend to round your tip over. But if you're coming across, you stop about halfway through your belt and pull off. Do the same thing on the other side as you're going back and forth. Drag it across and stop and pull it off about halfway. You'll keep your tip nice and sharp. That tip I actually learned from one of my subscribers a while ago, and I'm sorry I can't remember your name, but you know who you are. And again, other knife makers out there, if you guys see tips or little tricks that you can give me for things that I'm doing, please send them in because I love them and I love to share them with you guys. I'm going to start with the rough side of my leather. Anytime you're stropping, you're always dragging your blade across, not toward the edge, but away from the edge. You just want to do several passes, nice heavy weight on it. And the flip sides. And that is just bringing that edge to a razor sharp edge, and also any wire edge that you've developed on there as you've been sharpening. Going back and forth a dozen times or so on both sides will break that wire edge off and bring you down to your zero grind, which is just the sharpest edge you can have. Just finished up sharpening the edge and it is razor sharp. This knife is actually going to be a giveaway to one of my first 10 supporters on Patreon. So thank you guys so much, all of my Patreon supporters. It makes a big difference, we really appreciate it. But to one of you who are my first 10, you will be getting this knife. I did write those names down and I used the knife to cut all the names up so you can check out the paper test. So let's go ahead and draw the name now. All right, so our Patreon supporter who will be getting this knife is Cadence James. So thank you so much, Cadence. This makes a huge difference. I really appreciate it. You know, all that support is really, really welcome and really appreciated. It makes, you know, our ability to run this channel just that much better. Thank you guys all for watching. If you want to be eligible to win things like this in the future, so more things I'll be making on the channel I'll be giving away, those will be going to my Patreon supporters. So if you're interested, go over and check us out on Patreon. You'll see I have a raffle system as well, which will go some bigger giveaways when I hit those kind of different marks along the way, 50 supporters and then probably 100, and you know, as we go, we'll give away bigger things. But this has just been a really fun project. I'm super excited. I'm just having so much fun with blacksmithing. I hope it shows in the videos because this is great, and I'm still a beginner, but it's just fun to try this stuff out. You know, I really enjoyed forging out this knife from a railroad spike, and just to get the nice forged texture and grind down the blade. All these things are just super fun, and I just love the look of these type of knives and things. So, you know, look for more of those type of things on the channel. I will be doing more forged work and more forged knives. So if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and like this video. Also go ahead over to Instagram and follow us there to just kind of follow along with more things we're doing in the shop. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.